storytelling. We all have it. Who needs them? They're just like us. I don't think that's how it goes. Human beings tell stories. That's just what we do. We've done it since the beginning of time, and it's how we communicate. But there is no one on this earth who is more drawn to stories than middle schoolers. This is what I've learned. I've just been thinking a lot about how the stories that I have changed over time, because I'm still very, very tied to, like, my OCs and the little gay people in my head that run around in there. So I'm gonna talk about it. I got nothing else to talk about. And if you're wondering why I'm at this terrible angle, it's because I have to go to a steampunk dinner tonight with my friends. And I gotta figure out what I'm gonna wear. So I'm gonna be doing some walking around. I can knock over? Oh, great. Okay, this is gonna work. I wish I had a leather jacket. I think just in general that would be a good purchase for me. Could I make steampunk pink? Steam pink. Bet you've never seen that one before. You know what? We're whipping out this. I don't know what I'm gonna do with this, but we're gonna do something with this. I started writing stories when I was in 4th grade, 5th grade. Okay, it all started with Minecraft. This is a good point. Minecraft is a perfect storytelling tool, and the fact that Minecraft has been able to be a storytelling tool for this long and still remain relevant is incredible. Dream SMP brought so many people together through the art of storytelling. That's a whole other point. When I was in 4th grade, I started this little comic. It was a Minecraft comic about, at the time, it was a 2nd grader who was going to this Minecraft school called Junior Block Academy. He makes friends, but he encounters this bully, Herobrine, who, of course, since I know you're wondering, was a 4th grader. I had this, like, grand idea for, like, little Stevie, who is the main character, is gonna, like, go through school with his friends, and he's gonna redeem Herobrine, and it's gonna be all wholesome and cool. I never finished it, obviously, because I was a 4th grader, as if that's an excuse. I don't finish my stories nowadays. That was the beginning. That was the start of everything to come, and I remember it very well. I still have the folder with all of them. I might show some on screen, or I'll make another video where I read through it, because there's a lot. But it was so funny looking back. Because, you know, I was 9, 10? Nothing good has ever come out of a 10-year-old's brain. I'm sorry. If you're 10 watching this, first of all, leave. Second of all, you're not good yet. That was the beginning. I eventually moved on to bigger and better things. AKA, anime. I started making a story kind of when I was in 6th grade. I had this one class in middle school that I ended up taking. There was supposed to be a class where you were supposed to do gym one semester and a tech class the 2nd semester, and they're both supposed to be in the same period. For whatever reason, I ended up taking them both in the 1st semester, so I had to take an online class in the 2nd semester, and so I was just in the library and had a bunch of free time because my online class was like, it was photography, and it took like half an hour to do. So I would work on this one story that I had, which was about a girl named Opta. OPTA. I felt like I needed some quirky name for my main character. I've never liked my main characters. Can we talk about that? Every single time I've had a main character, I've always like, this is the placeholder. I develop all the side characters, and then I end up liking them better months later, so I just get rid of the main character. It's a problem. I'll unpack that later. But yeah, so I had this weird story that was a rip-off version of the 3D animated Inspector Gadget, because that was my life at that point. 6th grade me was on to bigger and better things than Minecraft. And then I eventually realized that story sucked, which was a lot of self-awareness for 12-year-old me, so I abandoned that. And in 7th grade, I started approaching more complex stories, which 7th grade I feel like was actually my renaissance for, like, story making. I made a bunch of friends in my art class who were all, like, very story-oriented people. But 7th grade was the start of something vitally important, which I've actually seen in my younger cousin, which is, it's the start of Edge. the chronic disease that serves us all in middle school. The need to be violent on an unrealistic scale because it has no grounding in your actual life. I was actually not one to really lean into edge. I developed this story that was, at the time, well, it kind of still is, but at the time it was rip-off Star Wars. It was called Endem, and the durotagonist at the time was this character named Drixon. And I'll show a picture of him here as old design. And he was not a cat boy. Not a cat boy. I would have fought you on this. When I was 13, I swore to God that he was not a cat boy, okay? He has little glowy things in the ends of his ears, and he's this race that I made up, okay? You see, he's got a little tail. He's got a dragon tail. Cat boys don't have dragon tails. He's not a cat boy. And also, his entire race got exploded by a nuclear bomb, which means he's just like, he's not a cat boy. He's not, I swear. Also, every time I look at his old design, I keep thinking about the fact that he has skin ears, which, you know, logistically makes more sense, but I feel like cat boys traditionally have ears that fit the color of their hair, and I was just like, no, it's the same color as his skin, because why would it be the same color as his hair, which once again makes sense, but it's just so ugly to look at. 13 years old was about my, like, renaissance for story making. I made a Star Wars ripoff story, I made an Undertale ripoff story, but I started developing these larger worlds and contexts for the stories I was making rather than just teen girl saves the world, small boy stops 4th grade bully, and I need better pants. It was an interesting time for me because it's also when I started getting into text roleplay, which if you are anything like me, know how that always goes. That's when I started making, like, way too many playlists, and of course I was into my, like, art, anime style, big eyes, pointy chins, whole shebang. I really don't know what I'm gonna wear. I wanna wear those pants, and I wanna wear that shirt, but they, like, do not match. Who needs it? Who did this? Who did this to steampunk? Is it like jazz? Can I just do anything and call it art? Can I wear anything and pretend it matches? Could I just throw on, like, 3 belts? Because that seems to be a theme. Or a cravat? I think we as a society should invest in cravats. But also I think one of the things that categorized my storytelling of that year was the fact that all the stories had, like, big villains. Antagonists that were affecting the entire context of the world they were in. So evil queens, evil kings, emperors, empresses, overlords, anything like that. Which is not something I had seen in my earlier stories. Actually, I totally forgot another story I had. The first story I had after the weird thing with Opta was just a story about a girl in high school. It was just like a cheesy romance, enemies to lovers, high school thing. Don't know where that came from, but I was very invested in it. What is this? Is this gonna... okay. What is this? Dry cleaners? Whose is this? Oh, this is mine. Okay. I was a little worried. I was like, I don't know if I recognize this. This is mine, right? Damn, I guess it is. I don't know whose else it would be. It's mine then. It's too late to go back. The overarching villains thing ended up becoming a problem because I think having an overarching villain in a story is great, especially when you have some, like, big sci-fi world that you're trying to build. But as I got older, I ended up realizing that that's just not what I want in a lot of my stories. Like, I started to prefer the more grounded conflicts versus the more bigger external conflicts that were, like, world-changing. Like, when I was in 7th, 6th grade, that was, like, pre-Endgame Marvel Renaissance. I keep trying to avoid using that word, because that's a bold word to use for everything. But it really was. Pre-Endgame Marvel was on a streak, and the movies were really good, and to this day, there are quite still a few good movies. They weren't quite as formulaic. My perspective on how to treat overarching villains has changed a lot with how I've perceived movies over the years, because back then, Marvel, in my mind, wasn't this big, multi-million, billion-dollar company chugging out movies with the same formula each month, a year, whatever it was. They were unique movies with unique plots and interesting characters that all built towards the same thing, which was really interesting. And it has stopped becoming interesting in the past few years. due to what I'm going to assume is probably money. Same thing with Star Wars. I remember when Star Wars Episode 7 came out, people were interested in the plot. People were like, Star Wars Episode 7 is good. But then looking back on the trilogy, the Star Wars Episode 7 ended up not being that great because of how it ended up working in the context of the other three. And both of those sets of films, the Star Wars franchise and the Marvel franchise, they've always had a heavy emphasis on world-bending plots, which is great. And it's more than just Star Wars and Marvel do this. I'm talking about what was popular at the time when my brain was consuming media. Obviously, world-bending plots are just a come with sci-fi and fantasy. But that was sort of the content I gravitated towards at the time because of Marvel and Star Wars. And ever since those movies have been thrown in a more critical light, especially Marvel now in the past like 2 years, I've started to find more enjoyment in internal conflicts. Which, of course, any good movie should have a balance of internal and external conflicts, but I feel like the ones that really resonate with me are the ones that put a focus on their character relationships, and thus I don't really care that much about these big villains anymore. Thanos just, isn't appealing to me. That kind of story isn't something I would create on my own. And so what ended up happening is I was continuing to build these stories that I made when I was in middle school, building the characters, building the plot, building the world into these big, huge universes that I have. But I ended up not liking the base that it was built on. So I have this one world, Endem, like I said, that was totally a ripoff of Star Wars, that I loved to bits, but the whole basis of the story and who the characters were something that I hated. And I ended up despising my main character for a long time because of it, and I had to completely redesign her. And it's gotten to the point where the story I have made is now, in my head, I imagine it as a choose-your-own-adventure, because I physically cannot decide on how to make this story work, and I've tried over and over for years. I have steamrolled that story hundreds of times. I have another story that was originally, it was an Undertale ripoff. It was about a main character who was just kind of zapped into the world via a prophecy, who had to stop an evil queen from kind of taking over this society. At the end of the story, she defeats the evil queen dies, all is back to normal. But I ended up not focusing on that. I ended up only focusing on the conflicts of the side characters. This one guy who made a robot to fill the hole that his dead nephew left, and is now struggling to keep his interpersonal relationships because he keeps abandoning everyone in his life. That's far more interesting to me. And so I ended up not caring at all about the main character and her story. So you know what I ended up doing? I got rid of her. I got rid of the main character, I got rid of the villain, and now the story is entirely just a world full of different isolated character moments. And that's the story. There's no timeline to it. The idea of having a big beginning and a big end just doesn't make sense to me because that's not what I'm focusing on. Now, of course, you can still have linear character stories with totally down-to-earth conflicts. You don't need a big villain to have a story with a beginning and an end. But the types of... I built the framework of a sci-fi story, and I'm now turning it into a slice-of-life story. Anyways, middle schoolers create stories that end up beating your ass later in life. Steampunk. I haven't done anything. I'm just standing here. I'm rambling. This was a trend for me for a while. I would create stories with protagonists, and then those protagonists would do their own thing, and then I would develop another story in the world about some side characters that would have a trio. And I would get so focused on this unrelated trio that over the course of years it just ended up being that I just took the trio and made it their own story, because who cares that John is trying to kill the president? No one cares about John. You know what I've done? I've pulled out pants, I've pulled out a belt, and I've pulled out a shirt, and none of them match. Not a single thing that I've put out matches. And there's 3 things. Do you know what the worst part about storytelling is? Telling the story. Do you know how hard it is to write? Every time I put my hands down on my funny little keyboard, it always comes up with something stupid. And I just kind of have to live with that. You know, maybe something I should do is I should start collaborating with other people. Maybe I should work together with other minds. Collaboration? It's kind of cringe. Man, I don't know. So I bet you noticed that this is extremely rambly, completely disorganized, and has no point. You would be correct. I've been wanting to start a YouTube channel for years now. I just need to do it. So I figured I'm gonna record myself talking about something I enjoy, see where it goes, edit it, post it, and then get myself on a weekly schedule. Because that's how you start. And so I'm making this kind of hoping that I will stop rambling. And in case you were wondering, this is a bit unrelated to your 2 other uploads. Will you ever go back to songwriting? I don't know. Stay tuned, I guess. I'm gonna figure out what my outfit's gonna be, and I will hopefully post pictures, maybe not, because I can do whatever I want. That's the fun thing. I'll see you later.